I'll make this a little bit bigger. Yay, okay. So that should be easy to see on a video. Okay, so this is the Wife of Bath's tale from the Canterbury Tales. And I talked about in the last one about the Decameron and kind of how it was framed with this story of the plague and how all these young people were going away. They were going to the country to escape the plague. And then they told each other 10 tales a day for 10 days. And that's why we have a 100 tales total in the Decameron. But in this one, the Wife of Bath's tale was intentionally going to be essentially there were 24 characters, and so it was going to be almost 100 tales. They were going to travel 4 days total, and so each day they'd tell a tale. And then over the course of all the, because they were traveling to, the reason it's called Canterbury Tales is they were traveling to the seat of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and it's actually the Canterbury Cathedral is where Thomas Becket was murdered by knights who were serving Henry II. And so he's martyred there. All of, they have different holy relics of his and things like that. So a lot of people would take a pilgrimage to Canterbury Cathedral. So they're on the road to Canterbury to go to Canterbury Cathedral together, and all these disparate people, all very interesting characters, decide, okay, well, we're all going to tell tales. They're going to tell 2 tales on the way there, and then each tell 2 tales on the way back. Okay. Well, he never finished the stories. So the Decameron has 100 tales. The Canterbury Tales did not ever get finished. So most people have told 1 tale. And that's kind of where it goes. So now we can name it just by whoever's tale it is. That's kind of how we do it today. So the Wife of Bath is a woman who's already had, like, she's looking for her 6th husband. So she's had lots of husbands. All of them she's survived, and some of them you wonder if they didn't get, like, henpecked to death or something, and they chose to die early so they wouldn't have to be married to her. But the prologue kind of covers this. This is just a simple tale, and it's an Arthurian tale. It's actually based in King Arthur's kingdom. And this particular version that I'm showing you in text, just skip, read the non-bold if you're happier with it, because the bold lines are all in Middle English and the non-bold lines are all in modern English. But the Middle English is that you can see it's really close to the modern English. The spelling is the bad part, is that there was no regular spelling until the 18th century. And so you could essentially spell things any way you wanted as long as it sounded right. And everything in Old English in Middle English would be pronounced as well. So it's kind of like Spanish where you pronounce every letter no matter what. And so, but they would pronounce all of the vowels as well. And so this first line, it says, in the old days of King Arthur, this would just be this was before the vowel shift. So in the old days of the King Arthur. So the pronunciation is actually very similar to Beowulf, but it's much more recognizable to us. In fact, when I took a couple of classes in Chaucer, and both times we read everything in Middle English. And by the end, it's not a big deal. You just get really used to it. You get used to things not being spelled right. And that's okay. But I'll mostly deal with the modern English. I just kind of wanted you to see how similar it was, because there's really not a big difference in how it's not only how it's spelled, but also how it's written. So in this case, though, this is the time of Arthur, and King Arthur, the king, Arturus, probably lived around the 5th century or the end of the 5th century. So he was very early, but his tales are actually all the way through Europe. There are Arthurian tales in Germany and France and definitely, of course, in England, but in pretty much every country has some types of tales of Arthur. And some of them have the same tale, but different versions of the same knight who was part of Arthur or something, Arthur's group of knights. In this case, though, it's only loosely about Arthurian stuff, because it does have Arthur and his wife, Guinevere, but it's really about a knight that doesn't actually get a name. So, but knights have specific duties. One of them is you have to protect women. and you have to do what's honorable. In this case, though, the knight in question did not do what he was supposed to do, and that's why there's the trouble. He starts out with some problems. Okay, so here's King Arthur, though, and it's a time of fairy. So you can see this fairy, and that's just like fairy folk. So it was filled with supernatural creatures, and that's the fairies, the little brownies, and then there's trolls, everything. So the elf queen with her jolly company danced very often in many a green mead. This was before the fairies all left, you know. Now, this was the old belief, at least as I read. I speak of many hundreds of years ago. And then she even says in her tale, but now no man can see elves anymore. And for now, with great charity and prayers of licensed beggars and other holy friars that overrun every land and every stream. So Christianity came in, entered the whole place, and they chased out all of the fairy folk because they're all Christian. And they blessed everything, and they made it so fairy folk couldn't live there anymore, essentially. Does that make sense? So cities, towns, castles, high towers, no matter where they blessed, the fairy folk could no longer live there. And so essentially that was the norm back then, but now of course it's all changed. However, back then women pretty much, you know, they could be victims of fairies. You know, fairies could take them, or they could be kidnapped or something. But now women are safe. Now, this is the wife of Bath, though. She talks about being a very lusty person. And so she doesn't necessarily think that's necessarily a great thing that women are safe because everybody's holy, but that's not so sad. That's not great. Even this, it says there's no other evil spirit but he. So the original says there is none other incubus but he. An incubus is a demon who intentionally targets a female to get her pregnant with a demon child. So it's not just an evil spirit, it's worse than that. Okay. But then he says, okay, now like they have no power. The fairy are all gone. But at that time, here's King Arthur, had in his house a lusty bachelor that on one day came riding from his hawking, and it happened that alone as he was born, he saw a maiden walking before him, of which maiden straightway, okay, so he sees a girl. He's gone hawking with his, you know, little hawk, and he's hunting and stuff. And he's on his way back, and he sees a woman just walking, but she's by herself. And he, without really thinking about it, takes the maiden straight away, despite all she could do. By utter force, he took away her maidenhead. He rapes her. And it doesn't say rape, but that's exactly what, when he takes away her maidenhead, that's what so she was a virgin and he raped her. This bad stuff. This is a bad dude. Yet he's a knight of King Arthur. These are things Arthur's knights are not supposed to do, okay? For which wrong was such a clamor and such demand for justice unto King Arthur that this knight was condemned to be dead. So he raped a woman. Oh my gosh, that's not ever supposed to happen. You should die. And by course of law, he was supposed to lose his head. He would be beheaded because that's, and she even says, perhaps such was the statute then. Like, I think that's what the law said, you know, except, so he would normally have just lost his head. King Arthur would have said, oh, bad night, chop off his head, and he would have lost his head and be dead. But no, the queen, Guinevere, remember, if you know Arthurian myth, Guinevere was having a long, years-long relationship with Lancelot, one of the knights of King Arthur. And she never had any children by him, but she definitely had sex with him a lot. So she was naughty, but she decided, the queen and the other ladies as well, prayed to the king for grace. Like, don't let the poor man be beheaded. Until he granted him his life. He goes, okay, fine, but I'm giving you the task of taking care of this man and punishing him. So I won't kill him. I won't cut off his head, but you need to take care of him so that he will, you know, he's punished sufficiently. Okay. And you get to pick, is he going to be saved or is he going to be put to death? The queen said, thanks. So he gave her control over this. And then she speaks to the knight. And when she saw her time upon a day, she says, you're in trouble. You still stand in such condition that of thy life yet thou hast no assurance. In other words, you don't know yet, I don't know yet, if you will live or survive this. So there's no guarantee I'm going to grant you your life back. But the only chance you have is if you can tell me what thing it is that women most desire. Now look at what thing it is that women most desire. So it's the same thing. So she says, I will grant you your life on one condition. If you can tell me what women most desire. What is it that women most want? Isn't there a What Women Want or something movie? And it's totally whacked. It doesn't even sort of come close to what women actually want. But she says, you have to find that. So beware. So be careful. Keep your neck bone from the iron, from the axe. If you cannot tell it right now, I will give you leave to go a 12-month and a day, so 366 days, to seek to learn a satisfactory answer to this matter. And I will have, before you go, a pledge that you will come back in 1 year to surrender thy body in this place. So she's trusting him. She's saying, okay, I'm going to let you go. And for 1 year and 1 day, you can wander around and find the answer to what women most want. But you have to swear you're going to come back in 1 year and a day. Now, any non-honorable person, this is meant in some ways to establish his honor. Because whether he has the answer or not, he's going to come back and face his doom in 366 days and say, I could not find the answer. And then he knows he will die. So an honorable man would come back. Now, most of us would assume, what's he going to do if he can't find the answer? He's not going to come back. Now, but he's a knight of Arthur. So even if he might rape a woman, he's going to be honorable and come back and face his death, which makes no sense. Most of us would go, what? If he's willing to rape a woman, then he's not coming back, because that's not honorable. But again, it shows a little bit of how violence against women was treated back then. And in some ways, we can see more of why so many people allow that kind of thing to happen today, or even do it. There's a different idea of who women are and what their power should be and things like that. So anyway, so he agrees to leave. He's upset. And he sighs sorrowfully, but what? He cannot do all that he pleases. So she's like, but he shouldn't feel bad about it, And so he decides, okay, he's going to leave. And he will come again at the year's end with such an answer as God would provide him. So he's depending on the Christian. He's not a pagan. He's not looking for fairies or anything like that. He's going to go find out what God can tell him about what women desire most. And he seeks everywhere. So he wanders. He wants to learn the thing that women love most, but nowhere does he get the same answer. So nowhere, he could not arrive in any region where he might find in this matter two creatures agreeing together. None of the women agree. Some women love riches best. Some said that honor. Some said they like to be happy, jolliness. In this translation, gaiety. Some wanted rich clothing. Some said they wanted lust in bed. Some they wanted to be widow and then wedded again, which is very much the wife of Bath. She doesn't mind it if her husband dies, then she can go find another one. Some said that our hearts are most eased when we are flattered and pleased. I totally disagree with that one. And the truth is, and she says he goes very near the truth. I will not lie. Like, she likes to be flattered and pleased. This is the narrator. This is the wife of Bath. And she goes, a man shall win us best with flattery and with attentions and with solicitude. And that will catch every single one of us. That's what she says. And then some say we love to be free and just do what we please and don't want to be reproved for our vices, but say that we are not wise and not as silly. They don't want men to be critical of us and tell us that we're silly or stupid. But the truth is do we have, anybody, none of us want to be told the truth. We'll kick back. We'll all be upset about it if we get told the truth about our deficiencies. And so the truth is, she kind of weighs in on some of these. We want to be considered wise and sinless, even if we're not. Okay. Some say that we like to be considered steadfast, like faithful and true, or that we can keep a secret, or and not reveal the things that men tell us. But that tale is not worth a rake handle. That's what she says. Women cannot help but gossip and give up secrets. We are terrible at it. She says we women can hide nothing. And she says, she brings up the tale of Midas and how his wife told, he had 2 ears of a donkey, and he told his wife, and he said, don't tell anybody. And she told she actually opened up the ground and yelled it into the ground, and it, I guess, echoed all the way through the land until everybody knew the secret, because she couldn't help it. She couldn't help but tell tales. And she tells the story of Midas with, had under his long hair 2 asses' ears, and he hid it except from his wife. And he trusted her to keep his secret, but she swore she wouldn't tell his secret. She would not tell it for her own shame. But then she thought she'd die if she couldn't tell it to somebody. And so she did. And so there's this little story within a story where women are just women. They can't keep secrets. They can't do it. So she's making fun of women at the same time she's kind of going through all of the things that women might want. And honestly, I think much of the reason is that you'd like to know, okay, what is it? Each woman may be sitting there going, okay, so what is it that women want? What is it that women want? If I were to say women in general want, what do they want? And most of us are going to come up with different answers. That's what she's kind of saying, is they don't all make sense. But then this night, he's like, what am I going to do? He doesn't have an answer because so many different answers are floating around. And within his breast, he's very sorrowful. But home he goes. So he has the honor to return home, even knowing he doesn't have an answer and he's going to be killed. The day was come that homeward he must turn. And in his way, he happened to ride. Remember, last time he happened upon a young maiden, and he said, "Ooh, she's pretty," and he raped her. This time, he happens to ride along near a forest, where he saw upon a dance go ladies 24 and yet more. So a bunch of ladies are all dancing. These are all fairy ladies. Toward which the dance he drew very eagerly and hoped that he should learn some wisdom. He's not coming to attack the women. So he has learned differently. He's also learned to listen to women, which he never did before. Remember, he just took her. But he had to go and question all these women, hundreds, they have to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands probably of different women. And he questions them and has to listen to their answers over and over again. So he sees all these fairies dancing. He's like, oh, I need to ask them. I might get some wisdom from women. It is a shift in thinking. It's a great lesson for him. I mean, it's still horrible that he raped a woman, but he's learning not to see women as objects, but to see them as people. And it's a smart thing for this. It's a very smart tale in some ways. But certainly before he came fully there, all the dancers vanished. Except on the green was sitting a woman, and she is hideous. A fouler white there may no man devise. She is the ugliest woman he has ever seen in his entire life. And when he walks in, the woman rises up and she says, "Sir Knight, there lies no road out of here. Tell me what you seek by your faith. Perhaps it may be the better." These old folks know many things, and because she's an old woman, she's old and scabby and ugly and repugnant. And he says, he's very sweet to her. He says, "My dear mother." So he treats her with a respect, a name of respect. "Certainly, I'm as good as dead, unless I can say what thing it is that women most desire. If you could teach me, I would well repay you." And he offers her, "If you teach me this, I will repay you. So you tell me, and I will give you stuff." And she says, "Pledge me thy word here in my hand." The next thing that I require of you, you shall do it, if it lies in thy power, and I will tell it to you before it is nighttime. So she says, you give me the very next thing I ask for. Swear it. And he swears it. I agree. Remember, he already swore he was going to return and face his death, which is what he's doing. So this is continued honor. And she says, okay, okay, I can pretty much boast your life is safe. And because I swear, what my answer, the queen will agree. She'll go, yep, that's right. And so she says, she goes, let's go forth without longer speech. Let's go. I've got the answer to your question, and I promise you the queen will agree with me. And so she whispered a message in his ear and commanded him to be glad and have no fear. And then they get to court. He came just as he had promised. His answer was ready, and everybody's listening. Queen's there, all the widows, ladies, noble wives, maids, all the women are listening to hear his answer. And afterward, this night was commanded. So he comes in. Silence was commanded to every person in the night, that the night should tell in open court what thing it is that worldly women love best. And he answers the question. He says, my liege lady, without exception, he said, women desire to have sovereignty as well over her husband as her love, and to be in mastery above men. This is your greatest desire. Even if you kill me, within you, you have to admit this is what you truly desire. Okay. And he says, so now you get to pick. Do as you wish, but I've given you the correct answer. I know it's right. And even in your heart, even if you don't, admit it, I know you agree with me. But I'm subject to you. So he can still be killed. She can say that's not it, and she can still execute him. And yet, in the court, there was not a wife nor maid nor widow that denied what he said. But they all said, nope, that's right. So 100%, absolute. They said, yep, that's what we want control. We want mastery. We want to be in charge. We want to wear the pants in the family, if you want to put it that way. And the old woman springs up and she says, I'm the one. She goes, mercy, my sweet lady queen. She has to do this now in public. Before the court departs, do me justice. I taught this answer to the knight. I told him the answer. And he pledged me that he would give me the first thing that I would ask of him, if it lay in his power. And then so she asks, I want you to take me as your wife. I want you to marry me. For well, you know that I have saved your life. If I say false, say nay upon your faith. And she said, and then I was like, dang, crap. Alas, and woe is me. He's all upset. I know right well that such was my promise. For God's love, choose a new request. Like, he's like, I don't want to marry you because you're all old and scabby. Well, he even says, take all my goods, take all my wealth and let my body go. Like, leave me alone. You're so old and creepy. And she says, no. Though I'm ugly, old, and poor, I would not for all of the metal, nor for ore that under earth is buried or lies above, have anything except that I were your wife and also your love. I need you to marry me and love me. And he's like, love? No. And he openly says that he would be foully degraded by her. He's not being very nice about this. But all for naught. The end is this, that he constrained was. He must by necessity wed her. He has no choice. And he takes his old wife and goes to bed. So he's lying in bed with this old lady, and he's like so upset. I'm sorry, I find it so funny. I know I shouldn't, but I do. But it says, some men would say that because of my negligence, I make no effort to tell you the joy, like that was the wedding feast. I'm not telling you, but there was no joy or feast at all. Everybody was sad. So he gets married to her. He's miserable all day after. He hid himself like an owl. So woeful was he because his wife looked so ugly. And so he's not being a really great dude. He's marrying her, but he's not giving her his love. And so finally, he has no choice. He has to go to bed with his old wife, who's creepy and scabby and ugly. And he wallows and he turns to and fro. And his old wife lays smiling forever, like she doesn't stop smiling. And she says, "Oh, dear husband, bless me. Does every knight behave thus with his wife as you do? Is this the law? Is this what knights do? They just roll around? I am your own love and your wife. I am she who has saved your life. And certainly I never did you any wrong. So why are you behaving like this? You act like a man who has lost it." So she's chewing him out. What did I do wrong? What's my offense? And it shall be amended if I can do it. Amended? You can't amend this. You're vile. You are so loathsome and so old. And you're descended from low lineage. No wonder I toss and twist about. And she goes, "Oh, so this is the cause of your distress, that I'm old and I'm ugly." And he says, "Yes, you are old and ugly. It's no wonder I'm distressed." And she says, and this is a very interesting take on it. She goes, "Well, I could change this if I felt like it within the next 3 days, before 3 days were passed, if you behave well towards me. But since you speak of such nobility and as descended out of riches, and therefore you should be noblemen, such arrogance is not worth a hen." She's saying all this, "Oh, you're of a higher station." Who cares? That's stupid. Look who is most virtuous. And that's the person who is the greatest nobleman, not the person who's born into it, but the person who's virtuous. Now, is this knight virtuous? No. He's bad. He raped a woman. He raped a virgin. He took her maidenhead away. He's a bad dude. Now he came back. He's showing honor. He's now listening to women, but now he's treating his wife like crap. And she says, Christ wants us to claim our nobility from him, not from our ancestors for their old riches. So you claim this makes you better. It doesn't make you any better. Virtue makes you a better person. That makes you noble. So you're not noble. And then she even brings up Dante. And yes, that's Dante's Inferno, Dante. And she goes, "Very seldom grows up from its small branches nobility of man, for God of his goodness wants us to claim our nobility from him." So she says it again. You're not noble because you're not a virtuous man. Okay? And so if they truly were noble, then they would never do bad things. So the people who are of the noble classes. And yet this guy was a knight. So he was part of that noble class and he did a vile thing. He dishonored a girl and he showed his vice. He was a bad dude. So she's kind of talking to him about it like, dude, you think that everything that you are is great, but it's not. Nobility has nothing to do with how much you own or your family, because it's only based in what you do and whether you are doing what you should. Virtue is what it noble and virtuous ancestors. And even if somebody has noble and virtuous ancestors, it doesn't mean that he won't be a scumbag. So he could still do churlish, sinful deeds and become a churl. Does that make sense? So she's over and over, she's saying, look, you can say all this stuff about, and she really is philosophizing. Of course, now what's he doing? He's writhing around and all that stuff. And then she says, "You reprove me for being poor." But Jesus chose voluntary poverty. And we all understand who Jesus is, and it's not, and Jesus would never choose a vicious form of living. Glad poverty is honest. So why would it matter if someone's poor? So she's again arguing against every way that he's judging, except she hasn't talked about the fact that she's super old, and she hasn't talked about the fact that she's ugly. But now she gets to it. Okay, so I'm old and you're reproving me for that. She goes, "Okay, sure. But don't all the books say that men should be courteous to an old person and call him father? Like, remember, he addressed her as mother earlier. You should be kind to old people. And then you say I'm ugly and old. But then you shouldn't fear to be a cuckold. You shouldn't fear that I'll be unfaithful because no other guy's going to want me because I'm gross and I'm old, but I'll be chaste and I'll be loyal to you. But she says, nonetheless, since I know your delight, I shall fulfill your worldly appetite. So she's giving him a test. Doesn't know it's a test, but it is. It's an absolute test. She says, choose now, right now. You can choice one is to have me ugly and old until I die and be a true, humble wife to you, or and never displease you in all my life. So that's one choice. Have a good, faithful, ugly old wife. Or choice number two, or else you will have me young and fair and take your chances with the crowd of other men that shall be at your house because of me, or in some other place as well may be. So in other words, you can have me young and pretty, but goodness knows if I'm going to be faithful, if I'm going to be loyal, if I'm going to be good to you. And there may be a string of men coming in and out of my doorway while you're not looking because I'm not faithful. So you have to pick old and icky and faithful, or young and beautiful and probably not faithful. And the knight, he's not sure. But at the last, he says, and this is where he passes the test, my lady and my love and wife so dear, he changes his tune. I put me in your wise governance. Choose yourself, which may be most pleasure and most honor to you and me also. I do not care which of the two, for as it pleases you, it's enough for me. In other words, he's giving her agency. He's giving her mastery of the situation, which is what women want most. He put her in charge, just like Arthur did a good thing by making Guinevere. He said, you pick what happens to the knight. Leave him in your hands. So he gives her the mastery of the situation. Now the knight is telling his wife, you pick. I leave it to you. Whatever you choose, I will be happy with. He does not pick. This is so important. If he picked young and beautiful, then she would probably have been horribly unfaithful and he would have been miserable. Instead, he says, you pick. And so what does she say? She says, then I have gotten mastery of you, she said, since I may choose and govern as I please. And he says, yes. And she says, kiss me. We are no longer angry. For by my troth, I will be to you both, that is to say, fair and good. So I'm going to be young and pretty, but I'm also going to be good and true. As ever was wife since the world was new. And then she says, and unless I am tomorrow morning as fair to be seen as any lady, empress, or queen, do with my life and death right as you please. Cast up the curtain and look how it is. And when the knight saw this, that she was so beautiful and so young, for joy he clasped her in his arms, his heart bathed in a bath of bliss. 1,000 times in a row did he her kiss, and she obeyed him in everything. And yet, and she obeyed him in everything that might do him pleasure or enjoyment. In other words, she is, because he gave her that choice, she's going to be the perfect wife. And now, is it a lie? Yeah. I mean, if you give a woman absolute mastery and absolute control, especially if that's what she really wants and she takes it, she may use it. Will she do what's right for the other person? No more than if a man had absolute mastery and control would he always choose what's right for his wife. And so it's turning it around to the other side. So instead of the man having all of the control and all of the mastery, the woman has it. And yet the husband is happier because he lets her have it. And so then they go have, and then she, of course, says, and then they lived until their lives end in perfect joy. And then she says, and Jesus Christ send husbands meek, young, and vigorous in bed. Like that's a prayer that you should say to Jesus. It's just so wrong. But she says, essentially, and she says, and grace to outlive them whom we wed. And also I pray Jesus shorten their lives if they're mean. That will be those are the men who will not be governed by their wives. And old and angry misers in spending, God send them soon. They're very pestilence. In other words, if they're really bad, then make them go to, hopefully they'll die very, much younger, and women don't have to put up with them. But it's such a funny tale because it does turn on its head the whole idea. I mean, women had so little rights at this time, and yet here they are able to do, if a man gives a woman that level of control, what kind of a relationship does that create when both people are allowing the other person to have a say? And it makes them into equals is what it does. And it's so, this is as weird, or at least as subversive as the story of Melchizedek in the Decameron, because it's saying, look, if you want a real marriage, the only way to do that is to give women mastery too. Women deserve to have some control over what's going on, or they're not going to be the right partner. And in some, today, certainly marriage counselors would be like, that's exactly the way it should be. Both people should have some control over what's going on. No one should be dominating over the other. So they would definitely speak mostly against that highly, not just traditional, but even one-sided view of marriage, that one is the master and the other one is only the slave or only the servant. If you have any questions or any comments, you can always put them into the chat. I didn't move up the chat. I didn't know if anybody would post anything, but if not, then I'm just going to go ahead and close this out, and that's it for today.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Guinevere is the one that got to do this. She was the queen that.
It was Arthur's wife. Yes.
Okay.
She's not named, but everybody knows who she. I mean, he never married anyone else.
Okay. All right. I was just curious. I have a question, but it's not about this class. It's
Okay. Well, let
humanity.
me go ahead and stop the recording, and then you can ask away.
Okay. Thank you.